great pleasure to be here tonight, not only because it is an extremely interesting exchange of powerful ideas, but it is great to be here because, being a political activist carrying direct topless protest, I usually have an opportunity to express my ideas within few seconds, just before being arrested. And usually using few words, the slogans that we write on our posters or our bodies. Moreover, the audience I express those ideas to is usually a very ugly audience, like Putin, Berlusconi, or Le Pen. The audience that represents violence, corruption, and discrimination. So, first of all, thank you for being this beautiful audience tonight in front of me. And thank you for the time to express my ideas. So I'm a leader of a movement that is trying to rebuild the world without permission. We thirst for a new society in which equality would become the highest law. Facing the unjust everyday reality, I often dream, how would it feel like living in the world of total equality between men and women, equality between gays and heterosexuals, between nationalities, equality between ethnicities, between poor and rich, between those who govern the countries and the citizens. But before telling you more about my ideas, I think it's important to tell you the origin of my passion, the birth of my commitment to this cause. I was born the year of collapse of USSR, and I grew up in Ukraine, the country with a third world level of poverty, the country with a political, economical, social crisis, the country where the government and the citizens never had good relationship. The dreams about equality appeared there. The very first time when I was a child, well, I was not that conservative, they just dressed me like this. So, in that time, I had the best friend, and her name was Katya. We studied in the same school, same class, we sat at the same desk, and on purpose even shared the same hairstyle. We were real friends. But the teacher was supporting Katya more to succeed in her studies because of influential position of Katya's father in city administration. One time when Katya was again named as a class best student, I felt that bitter taste of injustice in my throat. At that moment, I dreamed that my father would have exactly the same job as Katya's father. Or rather, more honestly, I really dreamed that Katya's father would lose his job, so we could all be equal in front of the teacher. That was the really first time when I thought about equality. And that was the first time when the protest was rising up in me. 10 years later, when I was a teenager, Orange Revolution took place in Ukraine. I fell in love with that moment, as that was the moment when people were no longer ignorant, they were no longer apolitical. I fell in love with that moment because people were not living for their own interest, but for the common one. It was beautiful. People were standing, holding hands of each other, and screaming in the name of democracy and freedom of speech. But unfortunately, quite quickly, the expectation of quick changes after Orange Revolution turned into a very deep feeling of disappointment. People were deceived by the lack of quick and concrete changes after the revolution and ended up electing dictator Yanukovych as a president. At that moment, I was studying journalism and was working in a press office of Kyiv city administration. I still believed that through my profession, I can keep fighting for those ideas that were brought to us by Orange Revolution. I believe that I can be that representative of freedom of speech as I dreamed to be. But my dreams were broken. My job and my work, I was totally dependent on political line of the government. In every material I wrote, I had to celebrate the actions of the mayor, sometimes even lie. I was desperate. I felt I had no choice, but I also knew that, as everyone, I wasn't born to be forced. And I didn't want to accept to follow the rules and conditions created by a little group of politicians with power and money. Being not satisfied with my own situation made me look around. And I saw how millions had given up. I saw a desperate society. I saw how young girls, my friends, were going to work to brothels as a prostitutes to be able to pay their studies in university. I saw how my mother and many other women were working for 10 hours a day and earning less than a minimum salary. I saw corruption and criminal acts of the President Yanukovych and the government. I realized that our Ukrainian dream of democracy was kidnapped. And I realized that it was our fault, as we didn't care about it enough. I understood that civil obedience to oppressive dictatorial regime was our problem. And therefore, civil disobedience becomes a duty. There comes a day when one has to take a position that is probably neither popular, nor tolerant, nor safe. But one must do it because his conscience tells him you can't accept it anymore. And that was the day I became an activist. I joined FEMEN movement. We wear Ukrainian flower crowns on our heads. We carry topless protest with political messages. Our mission is to spot out the problems, to put the light on what is ignored or hidden on purpose. Our mission, our duty, is to be those voices who break taboos created by the system, to open up the debates and to talk about the problems, as I believe this is the first step in solving them out. But let's be honest, nobody likes to talk about the problems. We don't like to talk about our problems, right? Moreover, I realized that people like it even less when someone else is talking about them, as this makes people aware of their own ignorance for the situation. Activism and taking political position is not popular. Very often people claim that we don't need activists because protests do not change anything. Others claim that people who protest, people like me, are doing it just because they have nothing to do with their own lives. And others say that because everything is fine around them, they don't need to protest. The system wants us to believe that nothing happens after revolutions and protests. But we know that there was something happening when, for example, young Nelson Mandela took a stand and joined protest, and at the first time he was treated as a hooligan. The first step for the big change happened. We know that there was something happening when Gandhi announced a hunger strike, and at first was called as a fool and useless. When Rosa Parks refused to sit on the back seat of the bus because she was black, as it was stated in the law. The first steps for the big change happen with those acts. And I know that there is something happening right now, all over the world. When Occupy Wall Street appears and introduces the idea of economical domination of 1% over 99% of population. When Spanish movement Indignados fighting home evictions starts to win municipal elections all over the country. When our movement, FEMEN, fighting all forms of patriarchy, is staging a loud campaign against sexual exploitation of women in Ukraine during football championship, the international community starts to ban the event. When we launch a one-year-long campaign alongside other feminist movements against anti-abortion bill in Spain, the government cancels the project. This is the true genius of activism. Being active and taking political position and speaking out loud your ideas is a first step towards the big changes that we all want. I believe that all progress that we can enjoy today was made through revolutions and people's resistance. In 2011, 3 topless activists, including myself, staged an ironical protest in Minsk in Belarus. We mocked from a dictator Lukashenko and supported political prisoners in Belarus. After this funny protest, we have been kidnapped, thrown into a bus. We were not allowed to speak, we were not allowed to move, we were handcuffed. We only could see a dozen of men wearing masks. For 24 hours, they were beating us and repeating that we will be killed for this protest. The next day, they brought us into a forest where they tortured us for hours before abandoning us in that forest. For 24 hours, being 22 years old girl, I was expecting that they will kill us. And when it all finished, that was the day that I realized that I want to live and act as never before. As I realized how this oppressive and scary dictatorial regime, how fragile it was in fact, as they were fearing 3 topless girls who appeared with political messages because we raised up against them, because we raised up for others. If you're one of those who think that you don't need to protest because everything is fine around you, because you found your comfort zone, it is wrong. Moreover, it is dangerous. Remaining silent or being neutral in the moments of injustice means to support injustice, means to participate in justice. Remaining silent about the problems automatically puts in danger those who choose to speak out about the problems, as it happened with our dear friends from Charlie Hebdo, with whom we have shared many ideas. They have been spotted and became an easy target because they were among those few who took a stand and were brave enough to speak out about what was bothering them. Only being united and understanding that we have to share the problems and to search for solutions together, this way we can represent a real force. We can become a real power. And if you think that protests and activism make sense only in the countries like Belarus or Ukraine that are neither democratic nor stable, this is also a mistake. I also thought so, but I was wrong. Here is a contemporary example, a recent example, why expressing out loud your ideas remains for us, well, actually a main priority for us today. A few months ago in February, I was giving a talk about freedom of expression in Copenhagen. I could say only a few sentences. I couldn't continue as my talk was disturbed by a... Well, let's listen to the record from this event.
And the turning point is but. Why do we still say but when we...
I couldn't continue my talk because of shots of Kalashnikov that were fired by a person moved by dogmas. A person who carried the ideas that were contradicting fundamental human rights. Running away from that place through the back door and hiding under the car, still hearing shots of Kalashnikov, I thought about this argument that we hear often. People say that we can be very offensive in expressing our ideas and that we go too far. Is it really us who go too far? Is it really that offensive to take off the top and write political message? Don't you think that it is more offensive to have a will to kill someone for expressing their ideas than any topless protest, even if you don't like it? Don't you think so? We don't take guns to prove that we are right, because we are confident enough. We act in the name of fundamental human rights, and we believe that everyone has a right to express their ideas, everyone, as long as they are not trying to take someone's rights or someone's life. I believe that we have to focus on revolution of values, where after all, we are just equal human beings without labels of nationalities, ethnicities, religions, sexualities, where we are just equal human beings who deserve exactly the same rights. We deserve a right to live, a right to speak, a right to think out loud. I think that we should not fall into self-censorship and accept this constant demand of being politically correct and not offending anyone. As for some, ideas of liberty can be considered as offensive as well. I think that it is a time when we have to unite all together and understand that our destinies are shared and our future is one, and that we have to take care of one another's problems and take care that your right is respected as same way as my right is respected. Very often people ask, when will we stop? And you know, my mother asked me often as well, believing that I can finally get married and have children. But you know, Mom, even if I get married and have children, I will not stop as long as speaking out loud about your ideas remains one of the most courageous acts. I will not stop because they beat us, they want to kill us for our ideas of equality, as they feared them. I will not stop because in the residence of dictator Yanukovych, that you, Mom, hate so much, they found a folder with the list of the enemies of the regime that was containing our names. As they were fearing us, it proves they were fearing us, and they didn't want us to act. I will not stop because I received dozens of messages from people who live in the countries where they cannot express themselves, and they ask us to continue. I will not stop because I don't agree to give up in front of those who moved by dogmas, who want to rule by domination and weapons. I will not stop because I'm also looking forward to do it together with all of you, those who didn't join yet. We should understand that this is our common cause. And yes, our stories are singular, and probably yours can be happier than mine, I hope so. But our destinies are shared and our future is one. We should stop saying that it is a fault of society and finally accept that society, it's us. We should feel solidarity towards one another's problems, and we should take care of the rights of each other. Being not a cartoonist, but hearing how they are killed for what they draw should make our lives tougher. Watching a man beating his wife should make our bodies feel hurt. Watching a refugees being expelled from a safe countries back to a war zone should make us feel illegal. Only feeling a solidarity towards problems of one another, we can start to make real changes. We can make that first step and change the society. Even if you are depressed today with your referendum, and even if you believe that nothing can go better, forget about it. Remember that the real power is people, is us. And I think that we finally should understand that our problems should unite us rather than divide us. We should stand together and fight against those who represent oppression, violence, and discrimination. I believe that it is a time. It is a time to bring them down. Let's do that. Let's show who is stronger. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. I believe that we can do it. Thank you.